everybody! Welcome to another online studio demo with Indigo Fire. Today I'm going to show you how to use the coil building method to build a vase. If you've ever taken an art class as a kid, you've likely made a coil pot before. Today I'll show you how to build the vase and then also a couple fun ways you can make your pot look unique. So you'll need to start out by gathering your supplies. I put the supplies in the info section of the video, and you'll also need to prep your workspace as always so that the pot doesn't stick to the table. So you can use canvas, newspaper. One of our students sent me a photo they were using a pizza box. I thought that was a really good idea. Cardboard is certainly a good surface to work on. So we're going to roll out a slab, and the slab will act as the base of our coil pot. So use your string or your wire tool, section off a little bit of clay, squish it down a little bit, and if you want to go really rustic, you could really just go with this, but we'll roll it out a little bit. If you've got your even sticks, you can use those to have a nice even width. If you don't have the sticks, definitely not the most important part of this project. Rotate your slab. Alright, cool. This is our base. You want to decide what shape you want the bottom of your pot to be. So if you're going to go for just a round vase, you can make it round, but you can also make it kind of wiggly and follow the coil along that path and see what happens. Sometimes some really cool shapes emerge if you start with a base that is not round. And then from the scraps of making your base, you can make your first coils. So I rolled out a few coils ahead of time just so that I could get through this a little quicker. You can do that, or you can roll them out as you go. For rolling them out, I usually squeeze my clay a little bit thinner so it's easier to start rolling. And then classic, roll out snakes just like you were a kid. Try to get them kind of nice and round and even. But this is one of those methods where if you want to go with a more rustic look, it definitely works if you just embrace it. Alright, so that's my first coil. Usually the coils are going to be a little bit thicker than you think you need them to be. We'll be using some of the clay from the coil to smooth over the seams on the inside of your piece. So make your coils a little thicker. Also, if you make them really thin, it's going to take you a long time to build up, but that might be what you're looking for. Okay, and then on the bottom, we're going to scratch and slip. So use a needle tool or a needle tool substitution to cross hatch all along the bottom. And then we'll add our coil. Pressing down as we go. And then once you get to the edge, you can use a knife or even your needle tool to slice that coil off. Smooth over the seam. And then at this point, you kind of have to make a decision about what look you're going for. If you want to leave the texture on the outside, you can leave this part smoothed, or you can leave it exposed. If you want to smooth it over, you can smooth it over. But when you're smoothing over, you at least want to do the inside. And I'm going around and using some of the clay from my coil to push into that seam. So I'm kind of going halfway over the coil and then pushing down, and you're left with kind of this fish scale texture. And same thing, some people like to leave that texture. If you don't want to, you can just use your thumb to smooth it over. And we're going to keep building coils like that for a while. That's basically how you do the whole pot. But a couple things you'll want to keep in mind is that the shape of your pot will will be based on how you build with these coils. So if I want to start building this pot out like this, I will build my coils along the outer edge of that coil. If I wanted to start building it in, I would put my coils on the inner edge. At the beginning, typically most forms you're going to start building out. So I'm going to start building my pot out and get some height on it, and I'll speed up the video for this part, and then I'll check back in when we have some options as to what to do next. All right, so I've got a few layers on there. This is definitely not a fast method of building, so it's a project for when you really want to kind of sit down and build something layer by layer. I have 5 layers or so on this pot, and I chose to smooth out the outside, but it's still a little bit lumpy. If you want to try to make it really nice and smooth, you can use your rib or an old gift card and smooth some of those lumps and bumps off the pot to get a nice smooth texture, if that's what you're going for. And at a certain point during your building, you'll have done a few layers and it might feel like your pot is getting a little bit flimsy. If you're building with really soft clay, then you might have to step away for a minute, let that base firm up, because as you build more weight onto this pot, we want our base to really have some structure to it, and we don't want it to start to sag with the pot. So if it feels like it's starting to get a little thin, a little flimsy, and you want it to feel sturdier on the bottom, set the pot aside, and you can come back to it after a little while and keep building. It's a good project to do over multiple days. You can take this piece, lightly wrap it with plastic, and then come back and build some more layers the next day. So for now, I'm going to put this aside and I'll come back and build some more layers after. So you've let the first layers of your coil vessel firm up, and you're either ready to add more simple straight coils, or you want to add some that are a little more fun. So some different options that you have is you can add a layer of these kind of spirals, you can add a layer of different round spheres, different sizes, you can do different kinds of rainbow kind of scallop patterns like this. Really whatever you can come up with that will go along the edge of your pot, you can use. I'm kind of feeling these rainbows, so I'm going to add a layer to my pot of this pattern. If I was in the studio and I was building this not at home, this tool here is really good for cleaning up your coil pots. So if you have one at home and you're able to use it, a rasp like this is great for leveling off your piece so that you can put one of these fancy layers on. You can also use an X-Acto knife at home to level off your piece, but it's not necessary. You don't need to. If you're embracing the kind of funky quality of a coil pot, then you can just build straight on that next layer. But if you're trying to get things really smooth, a combination of using this rasp on your piece and a rib or an old gift card will make it so you can get a really smooth surface if that's what you're going for. All right, and then I'm gonna start adding my layer of rainbows. And when you're adding these, or when you're making these, what you'll do is you'll want to take some really soft clay. You don't want it to crack on you as you're trying to make your shapes, and these thin strips of clay can sometimes get dry really quickly. So I'm rolling it out thinner than I was for my layers. Take my knife and square off the end, and then the middle one is just the spiral folded over on itself. Slice it, build another layer, drape another one on top of that, slice it so it's nice and even, another one on top of that, and you can make them have as many layers as you want, but I'm gonna have 3 on mine. Kind of squish them together, and then you really carefully want to smooth over the seams on one side of this. If you have your needle tool, you can kind of use the needle tool and drag the clay between the seams before you try to do it with your fingers to try to get some of that clay just moving into that area. There we go, that's fine. And then we've got another rainbow. So I'm gonna collect a bunch of these, and then these will make the next layer of my pot. When I'm adding the first one, same thing as when I'm building, I'm gonna scratch and slip, And this first layer of scratching and slipping will be really important. The bottom of your pot has firmed up a bit now, so when you attach the next layer, you want to make sure that you have some slip. So this top layer has firmed up enough that I think that I can add a few more coils, and I'm just going to lightly drape them on top of this so that they kind of naturally fall into those grooves. I'm not worried about the spaces at this point because I think that will look nice. You can do whatever you'd like though for your pattern. If you wanted to fill in these spaces with some little spheres or discs of clay, you could do that, and then it would be able to hold more water. But I'm just going to lightly drape my coils on top. So since these are firmed up a bit, I'm going to add a little bit of slip where the clay will stick. And then lightly take my coils and drape them over the vase, kind of pushing them into that groove as I go. Alright, so I apologize, my video cut out when I was finishing up the last few steps on this pot, but that's okay. You saw what you needed to see. So I was adding the last coil on top of these scallops here, and I just added a few more on top of that. So you can see I added 3 coils in total, and then the last thing I did is just went around the top edge and kind of pinched and shaped the top edge so it was a little bit thinner. Then the last thing you'll want to do is take your paintbrush and just smooth over some of these seams that look a little bit crusty. But the paintbrush with just a little bit of water will really soften all of those seams so that they look nice and smooth. And like I said, this is our finished coil pot. This is a great project for really sitting down if you want to do something a little bit intricate, if you want to make like a larger vase shape. You can really get creative with your coils and making this vase. So give it a shot, good luck, and send me your photos when it's done. Bye!